Unlike the issues we have with the lightweight and welterweight divisions, the bantamweight division is getting crazy. Everybody has a fight besides 4 fighters in the top 10, and the fights got announced recently. The fighters that are not competing right now, Aljamain Sterling and TJ Dillashaw, are targeted for September 10th on UFC 279. So at least we do know that TJ and Aljamain is the fight that the UFC wants to put together. It wasn't Jose Aldo, it wasn't Petr Yan a third time, it's TJ, and a lot of people are not too happy about it. They're saying that Jose Aldo deserved the title shot even more given the fact that TJ popped 2 fights ago and should have lost the decision against Cory Sandhagen. But the fight is not confirmed because Sterling is not signing the contract until he gets more pay. Hopefully everything works out, but you might get an interim title fight, so it might not actually be Sterling and TJ Dillashaw. There is a possibility if Sterling refuses to fight TJ that we might see TJ fight Petr Yan for an interim title, because the other fighter, the third guy that doesn't have a fight, is Petr Yan. Whether that's on purpose, by accident, coincidence or not, Petr Yan is a perfect opponent to fight for an interim title. But it is kind of weird because if that were to happen, that would be Petr Yan's second attempt at an interim title during Aljamain Sterling's reign as a champion. But either way, both of these could be pretty good fights. TJ is a harder opponent for Aljamain Sterling than he is for Petr Yan for sure. I think Yan should be able to beat Dillashaw. I think TJ can be easier to hit depending how his wrestling goes. He has a different style of takedowns than Aljamain Sterling does, but overall he might be able to also take Yan down a few times in the fight. But we do know that Petr Yan's a very smart fighter. He probably will be able to make adjustments from that Sterling fight and learn a few things, because that was the main issue of his fight, getting taken down and giving up his back. He cannot do that against TJ as well. When it comes to the stand-up, Aljamain has poorer striking defense than TJ does, but when TJ gets hit, he usually gets hit pretty flush. He walks into shots, he angles into punches, he has a lot of erratic movements, and some of those movements run into shots. And the thing we know about Yan is he was able to pick apart Cory Sandhagen the later the rounds went. Sandhagen, I believe, can be even trickier than Dillashaw because of his length and height, combined with the techniques that he uses, which in some way can be pretty resembling of TJ. I think he will be able to do the same thing as TJ, and as we know, TJ gets hit flush. And I believe like around the 3rd round onward is when Petr Yan is going to really start hurting him. They both switch stances, which is going to cause a bit of a issue for TJ Dillashaw, because every single time he fights someone that can switch on him, he has a much more difficult time. Dominick Cruz, Cory Sandhagen. In fact, Cory Sandhagen switching was able to drop TJ Dillashaw because the angles that TJ wants to take off on you is from your initial stance. So if you start orthodox, he's angling off as if you're going to stay in orthodox. All of a sudden, when you switch on him, that angle he took completely goes away, and in fact, it makes it dangerous for himself. So I definitely could see Petr Yan putting together those switch combinations to intercept TJ Dillashaw's movement being probably the thing that's going to get him the victory. So I definitely do see that Petr Yan loses the early rounds against TJ, but he absolutely dominates the later rounds. In fact, I see him dropping TJ inside the mid rounds and might even finish him before the final bell. As for Sterling versus TJ, it's a tough one for Aljamain. I'm not gonna lie here, man. He can start pot shining TJ while moving around and stuff, but his takedowns might get completely thwarted if TJ shows up right. Because man, he hasn't been taken down consistently since he fought Dominick Cruz. That was way back in 2016. Cruz is a very unorthodox way of shooting takedowns, but Aljamain could do kind of the similar thing, to be honest here. He just has a different kind of length to his takedowns that TJ's probably not used to, right? I don't think the initial shot, the initial double leg or single leg from Sterling is going to get TJ to the ground, but perhaps rising into a clinch and trying to get some trips out there, being that he is the much bigger fighter. I mean, the guy's already talking about fighting at featherweight if Merab is able to find his way to a title shot, and TJ should not even be looking at the featherweight division. So maybe through the strength advantage that Sterling has over TJ, he may be able to trip him out, maybe body lock him and slam him. Generally looking at the fight, I can see TJ shutting down almost every single takedown, outstriking Aljamain for the most part. He's not going to be as tentative as Petr Yan was in the early rounds. And his erratic movement that we talked about before, the switching of stances and all that, combined with his power punching and power kicks, will be a lot more threatening against Sterling than what Petr Yan presented in the rematch. And the switching of stances is really going to catch Sterling off guard when Sterling's throwing the jabs and the right crosses and being very long. And man, TJ's going to be slamming on leg kicks. Aljamain kind of gives his leg out to you because he believes in his wrestling and catching kicks and trying to take the opponent down and stuff. But Petr Yan was landing a lot of them in their first fight. I think TJ is going to reintroduce that against Sterling. So definitely I do favor TJ to beat Aljamain. But that's only if he shows up correct. Now those are the fighters that don't have a fight right now. But here's the ones that do. We have the number 3 Jose Aldo versus the number 6 Merab Dvalishvili. And boy, that's a terrible stylistic matchup for Merab. Then we have the number 4 Cory Sandhagen versus the number 9 Song Yadong. That could be an interesting one. A lot of people are running off Song Yadong, but I wouldn't be too sure about that right now. Then we have the number 5 Marlon Vera versus the number 8 Dominick Cruz. This was announced a bit ago, but something we haven't talked about yet. Really good fight. I cannot wait for that one. And there was another fight we already talked about between the number 10 Pedro Munoz versus the number 13 Sean O'Malley, which is a well-designed fight. Regarding the Jose Aldo and Merab fight, number 3 versus number 6. Merab is seen as someone that is pretty much inevitable he's going to enter into the top 5 one day. But man, they got to throw him a brick wall like Jose Aldo already. If there was anybody for Merab to avoid, it was supposed to be Jose Aldo. This is the only guy he does not want to fight, because we're talking about Merab, who has the heaviest wrestling style in the whole weight class. Some people say he's like the 135-pound version of Khabib, where he just constantly attempts takedowns, rides you out, grinds you out, crazy pace, great cardio, very tough, awkward striking technique but makes it work at times, just has this super suffocating pressure, and he's going up against the greatest anti-wrestler MMA has ever seen. Jose Aldo has defended takedowns against some of the best wrestlers and made it look easy. He has never been taken down more than twice, and that was Frankie Edgar way back in the day when they first fought each other. Frankie had a hard time even getting on his hips, and Aldo's just a far better striker in every department, from the power to the speed to the technical ability, from his boxing to his kickboxing to his Muay Thai skills. Bringing it all together, there is nothing really that Merab can do to Jose Aldo on the feet. I mean, Aldo is such a high level that he dealt with Pedro Munoz's calf kicks better than anybody's ever done before. He dealt with the best jab of the division from Rob Font. He dealt with the most powerful and explosive fighter like Marlon Moraes. In fact, Moraes is the guy that almost knocked Merab out. Imagine what Aldo was going to do. And that was a no chin out of his prime Marlon Moraes, who was nearly retired. You almost get knocked out by that guy? Good luck with this version of Jose Aldo. So with his striking skill, combined with the best takedown defense we've ever seen, he is a kryptonite to wrestlers. There is not a wrestler that has beaten this guy, and I doubt it's going to be someone even smaller like Merab. I definitely see Jose Aldo, because it is a 3-round fight, to most definitely dominate from start to finish. He's not going to gas out as he's shown in the past. He's going to defend most of the takedowns. He might get taken down once or twice, but I have a hard time seeing Merab controlling him if he does get him to the ground. And Merab is going to be eating a ton of shots. So definitely I have to favor Jose Aldo. He just shuts down Merab's game. And off of that win, Jose Aldo definitely deserves a title shot. If he destroys Merab or just even beats him, he should be fighting for the title next. And if some way Merab beats Jose Aldo, he might deserve it as well. And then Aljamain goes up to featherweight. Now we talk about Cory Sandhagen versus Song Yadong. When this was announced, a lot of people did not like Song Yadong's chances. They think that Cory Sandhagen is going to run through this guy. I can see what a lot of people are looking at. I mean, Cory Sandhagen is fighting at a higher level. I mean, look what he did against Petr Yan and TJ Dillashaw. But at the same time, just because you're fighting at a higher level against higher caliber opponents does not always mean you're going to beat the guys that are coming up. Cory Sandhagen is looked at as a veteran of the weight class, and Song Yadong is that young contender rising very quickly. I mean, the guy's 24 years old. Even if he loses to Cory, this guy has a bright future. It's going to be about time one day Song Yadong at least fights for a belt, whether it be after beating Cory or whether it be him losing and getting it later on. But here's the thing, man. Of course, we have the statistical differences between the two guys. Cory is much taller, he's much longer. An advantage he's going to have against everybody in the weight class minus like Sean O'Malley. Whereas Song Yadong has a relatively short reach for the weight class. He's 5'8", which is pretty regular. In fact, he's on the taller side, but he has a 67-inch reach, which is shorter than even his height. But at the same time, like he showed against Marlon Vera, he makes it work, man. He finds his way on the inside. He's so fast. He explodes out of nowhere. He has great footwork, always moving at full pace. And the way he springs back and forth, you just know that overhand is going to be super destructive. And another big thing here is the leg kicks, the side kicks to the knee, and the round kicks are going to be very disruptive of Sandhagen's movement. And if the fight goes later into the rounds, because this is supposed to be a main event, and if Song Yadong has that kind of cardio, which I don't know how he could given how explosive he is, if he can go in the later rounds with that kind of power and break down Sandhagen's leg throughout the duration of the fight, that chin is not going to be that hard to find. And I definitely see Song Yadong going to the body as well. It looks like Cory is somewhat vulnerable to body shots, especially when you start to mix up targets and switch off to the opposite stance. Both guys will definitely switch stances in the fight. Sandhagen's going to be trying to find his opportunity to land counter shots on the back foot while being in the opposite stance. In the same stance, going to be looking to pump out a lot of jabs and leg kicks, potentially try to set up some kind of high kick as well, depending what kind of angle he has. Spinning attacks or just front forward round strikes, it's all going to depend on the circumstances of what's going on, as he is a bit opportunistic to find these crazy strikes and knock his opponent out with, a la what he did against Marlon Moraes and what he did against Frankie Edgar. The traps that he sets around the octagon is extremely high IQ to do. And I definitely see someone as young and as inexperienced as Song Yadong. He might fall into these traps easier than the guys that Cory has fought in the past. And I know a lot of people are going to be talking about, but Song Yadong is probably going to bring a lot of differences than what Marlon Moraes brought when he fought Cory Sandhagen. And that could be relatively true, but I definitely do think that Song Yadong is smarter than Moraes was. He will attempt takedowns if things are going south. He will switch stances to find different kind of strikes at different kind of angles, but at the same time, he will attack mostly on a linear path, and that's going to draw him into a lot of those traps from Sandhagen. But I do see him pressuring Sandhagen more effectively than Moraes did. I think he's going to be a bit more patient and learn from the mistakes of some of Cory's past opponents. And maybe not linger into the mid-range too long like Frankie did, right? Frankie was trying to stick in one range and it allowed Cory Sandhagen to understand where he had to place his shot. And as for Marlon Moraes, he didn't really know where to really stay in front of Sandhagen. I think Song Yadong is going to be a lot more intelligent in that way, where knowing where to stick at is going to be his biggest weapon here. Outside of kicking range, he can be there because he's fast enough to explode from there and connect on his opponent before they even know it. So that different level of speed that he has, combined with his footwork and his punches, will catch most of the division off guard. And at the same time, if he's right in front of Sandhagen, that's ideal. That's where he's going to want to be because he can mix up his body shots with his head strikes like he did when he knocked out Marlon Moraes. Mid-range is where he has to be very, very careful because that's where the flying knees are going to be coming. That's where the jabs are going to be popping him in the face. That's when the uppercuts are going to be there. That's when the shifting angles for the crosses and the uppercuts and the hooks, all those are going to come at the mid-range for Sandhagen. I do favor Cory Sandhagen to win, but I do not think it's going to be as easy as a lot of people think it's going to be. I think Song Yadong is going to show in this one that he's going to rise to this challenge, fight at the best of his abilities, and we might see a better Song Yadong than we've ever seen before, and it's going to be like another one of those Yair Rodriguez moments. I think Song Yadong is going to put on a similar performance unless he gasses out in the fight. That is something we don't know of yet. How will he pace himself for 5 rounds, and how will he be in the 4th and 5th rounds? So ultimately, I do see Sandhagen popping him in the face with a lot of jabs, kicking him to the legs, putting up a lot of kicks to the body and to the head, mixing up the targets and trying to condition Song Yadong into many traps he's going to be setting for different kind of scenarios, and that could be the finishing sequence in the fight, or it could just be some big moments to win rounds. And even if Song Yadong takes Cory Sandhagen down, I don't think his jiu-jitsu is far enough to be able to do much on top. He might land some good ground and pound shots, but I do think that Sandhagen is going to be able to tie him up or even just find an opportunity to reverse it and stand up. And then we go to Marlon Vera versus Dominick Cruz, which is looking to headline a UFC fight night on August 13th. So it is going to be 5 rounds, which I think helps Marlon Vera more in the fight, giving him more chances to knock out Dominick Cruz as the fight stands up. Because Dominick Cruz is mostly going to be attempting takedowns. He's going to have to at least. I mean, he doesn't want to stand with Marlon Vera for too long. And given that Marlon Vera is more of a kicker than he is a puncher, it's going to give Dominick Cruz way more chances of getting the fight to the ground and trying to win over rounds by landing ground and pound shots and just doing a little bit more than Vera. And those are the strengths of the fighters here. Dominick Cruz's takedown is going to be his biggest weapon. A lot of people probably say, what about his evasive footwork? I just find it hard for him to get away from the leg kicks because his footwork just does not have any checking ability. The only thing he kind of has is just punching over them, which he doesn't have that much power, and more importantly, trying to take the opponent down because of the kicks. So because of that, Marlon Vera has many more weapons here to go to that are much more impactful in the fight. This fight is most likely going to a decision. Dominick Cruz is very tough, and Marlon Vera, he's become a lot more dangerous ever since he became more offensively minded. Marlon Vera has always had the skills to knock people out or inflict damage like he did against Rob Font, except in the past, he was so much more defensive for no reason at times. And it would be pretty frustrating. It was almost actually like when you were watching Jorge Masvidal when he was in the lightweight division. It was like this guy could do a lot more if he just went forward and threw some stuff out there. Marlon Vera's pressure, counter punches, and leg kicks are going to be his main weapons in this fight against Dominick Cruz because Cruz has a different kind of footwork than Vera's ever fought before. He did fight Sean O'Malley, who's long and tall and fast and switches stances, but it's not like Dominick Cruz at all. Kicking Sean O'Malley's legs is different than kicking Dominick Cruz's legs. With Dominick Cruz, you got to get a little bit deeper with the leg kicks. With Sean O'Malley, he kind of gives his leg to you because of how wide he is. Most of the time, Dominick Cruz is very narrow with his stance. Because he brings his feet together, it's hard for him to check anything, and he's always moving laterally. Just like Henry Cejudo showed, you have to get deep in there. You really got to get in on Dominick Cruz to land the leg kicks. But it won't be that much of an issue for Marlon Vera, considering how long his legs are. I mean, he has a 40.5-inch leg reach. You know how crazy that is? He has a 2-inch reach advantage with his legs compared to Stipe. And Marlon Vera's 5'8", Stipe's 6'4". He's even close to Ciryl Gane's leg reach, which is 42 inches. He's only 1.5 inches away. So I don't see it that difficult for him to start reaching a little bit more to tag Dominick Cruz's legs. Now, there is always a threat that he gets taken down, because Cruz might be trying to counter those leg kicks with takedowns, and he knows that Vera's going to be kicking a lot. And that could be a bit of an issue, because when he did fight Frankie Edgar, he got taken down a couple times out there. And it might be because he has such long legs, opponents are able to get in on him easier than some other fighters. And if you remember, when Frankie took him down in the first round, he held him down for like 3 minutes straight, but at the same time, Marlon Vera was very active off his back with strikes, and he was making it very difficult for Frankie to get around his guard. In fact, maybe because of how long his legs are, he could wrap around the opponent a lot easier. And he probably has different kind of leg strength as well, because even Frankie, man, the guy had a hard time getting around it. Dominick Cruz's main weapon in this is definitely going to be the takedowns. But the fact that it's going to be a 5-round fight is going to hurt Dominick Cruz in this one, I believe, because the more it stays on the feet, the more chances Marlon Vera gets to hurt him. And we know that Dominick Cruz probably doesn't have the same chin anymore. He's a bit older, 37 for the Bantamweight division. The end of the front kicks might catch him. Potential intercepting knees just like Henry Cejudo set up on Dominick Cruz. The counter shots in case Cruz gets a little bit too wild, which he does often, and becomes somewhat easy to counter as Cody Garbrandt showed the blueprint. Kind of just allow Dominick Cruz to strike first, while putting a bit of pressure on him. His head is not going to be that hard to hit. It's usually when the opponents are chasing the punches, chasing the knockout, that they have a hard time with Dominick Cruz because he's evading you in his footwork. When he's engaging you, his footwork is not as evasive, and he kind of just leans into punches often, right? You saw that same exact thing happen to Henry Cejudo, and that's why he ate a knee. So I definitely could see Marlon Vera doing a very similar thing, knowing that he is such a student of the game. I could definitely see him picking out those kind of openings on Dominick Cruz, and that's why I'm going to have to favor him to win this fight. I think the leg is going to be super disruptive, even if he gets taken on his back. I don't think Dominick Cruz is going to be able to do too much on top, to be honest. I think he might get trapped in the guard. He might actually get outstruck as Marlon Vera is on his back, and always going to be running the risk of getting knocked out as long as it stays on the feet for those 5 rounds. And that's the end of the Bantamweight breakdown. This division is looking pretty crazy. I'm super happy the fights are actually getting put together, and these guys are willing to fight each other. And man, this division is going to shake up after all these fights are finished. I cannot wait.